or not? And get this, though, right, more broadly, 22% of UK working-age population are apparently economically inactive. What on earth do we do about that? And in a move that's upset many, Rishi Sunak has announced that the UK needs to build new gas power stations to ensure the country's energy security. Is that common sense or a kick in the teeth for climate change? You tell me. And get this, the Media Democracy Festival takes place this weekend. Sounds fabulous. What, though, is their first item of discussion? Any guesses? How to solve a problem, like GBNews. A look at hate, conspiracy and bias. But look at that. Yes, indeed. That's all to come over the next hour. Richard Tyson, Joe Phillips keeping me company. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for tonight's latest news headlines.
I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story. Kemi Badenoch has become the first government minister to say Frank Hester's remarks about Diane Abbott were racist. She welcomed Mr Hester's apology, but said it's never acceptable to conflate someone's views with the colour of their skin. It's after the Conservative Party's biggest donor reportedly said Miss Abbott made him want to hate all black women and she should be shot. Mr Hester has now apologised and says he abhors racism. Miss Abbott, who's now an independent MP, described the comments as frightening and worrying. Lee Anderson made his first appearance in the Commons this afternoon since defecting to Reform UK. He took his seat on the opposition benches next to George Galloway. Mr Anderson was stripped of the Conservative whip last month after refusing to apologise for saying that Islamists had got control of the London mayor. And children in England who identify as trans will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers. The government said it welcomed the landmark decision, which they say is in the best interests of children. Puberty blockers, which cause physical changes in young people, will now only be available to children as part of clinical research trials. In other news, social media influencer Andrew Tate insisted that he's innocent of the charges laid against him as he was released from police custody in Romania this afternoon. A court in Bucharest ruled that he can be extradited back to the UK to face charges once his trial in Romania ends. He was arrested after lawyers representing 4 of his accusers told British police that he was planning to flee Romania, where he and his brother Tristan now live. They're accused of sexual offences and human trafficking, allegations they've both denied. Speaking after his release from custody, Andrew Tate said Western countries were run by Satanists.
I want to give absolute credit to Romanian justice for making the correct decision today. Unfortunately, I don't think many people in Romania understand, but in the West, in the countries that are owned by the Satanists, when you get to a certain level of fame, you either put on a dress or you go to jail, and I'm happy to make my choice, which is jail every single time. My soul is not for sale, neither are my principles. We are innocent men. No, we're very innocent men, and in time, everybody's going to see that, and we're very excited to finish this judicial process and clear our names.
Police investigating a chain of funeral homes in Hull have now recovered 35 bodies and a quantity of what's suspected to be human ashes. It comes as 2 people arrested in connection with that ongoing investigation have been released on bail. The 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman were being held on suspicion of a number of offences, including preventing a lawful and decent burial. Hundreds of families who used legacy independent funeral directors have contacted the police, fearing they may have been given the wrong ashes. Speaking at a press conference earlier, Assistant Chief Constable Tom McLaughlin took the opportunity to speak directly to the families involved.
My heart goes out to you all, and I can only imagine how distressing this is and how upsetting it will be for you and your families. I know that you want and need much more information than I can give you today. But as we progress with the investigation, I want to reassure you that we will provide you updates as soon as we can. And I also want to give you a personal commitment that I will do everything possible to give you the answers that you deserve.
And what does the Queen have in common with Elton John, Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley? They've all been immortalised in the form of their very own Barbie doll. Her Majesty was presented with the toy today, as you can see, wearing matching outfits in recognition of her support of the Women of the World Foundation, joking that it made her look 50 years younger. She's the latest in a long line of notable people, past and present, whose likenesses have been captured by the world's most famous doll. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. I've got to say, that story we've just been hearing about in the headlines there, the funeral situation in Hull. As a Hull girl myself, it's absolutely chilling. I'm really following that story with a huge amount of interest. I look forward to the more details as we learn them. But for now, alongside me till 7 o'clock tonight, I've got the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tate, and the political commentator, Joe Phillips. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
Another story I saw in those headlines there, the Barbie doll.
I know.
I always remember you, young lady, been on my panel.
That's right.
Calling, who was it? Liz Truss.
I said
a Barbie doll.
She was Foreign Secretary at the time, and you and Alex Dean said I was being sexist. I was merely pointing out that she seemed to spend a lot more time having photographs in different outfits with different backdrops.
I remember it well, and I was
stand by it.
I was prompted then by
I
that
think
Barbie
you should
doll.
have your own Barbie doll.
I think I should as well, quite frankly. So if any companies watching that makes Barbie dolls, you can feel free to make one of me. Why not? So
and Richard, you can be just
Can I have my Ken doll?
You are just
Ken. You can be. Yeah,
you're
you can have your own Ken doll, whatever. Anyway, look, we are Michelle Dewberry and Kerr, or Care, if you have a full accent like me. What can I say? You know the drill on this programme. It's not just about us, it's about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? gbviews@gbnews.com is how you email me, or you can tweet or X me at gbnews. Now, Boris Johnson, there are rumours that he might actually be deployed back up north to try and win back red wall voters. It's got me thinking tonight, would you welcome a knock on the door from the former PM? Could he convert you back into voting for the Tories if perhaps they've lost your vote? You've already started getting in touch with me on this one. Alison says, Michelle, Boris would never help Rishi Sunak. Why on earth would he? Archie says, Michelle, bring back Boris because he should never have been removed in the first place. Oliver, if Boris Johnson was still the PM, the Tory party wouldn't even need to be saved. But Chris says, why on earth would anyone trust Boris again? We lent him our votes and he spat it back on our fence, he says. Fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, shame on me. So he says, we'll keep your thoughts on that one coming in. Let me start with you, actually, Joe. Boris Johnson, is he the man then to keep that red wall for the Tories?
Well, I think anyone who's seen me on your programme over the past will know perfectly well that I have a very low opinion of Boris Johnson. I think he brought the Conservative Party government and Parliament into total disrepute. He's a liar. He can't be trusted. However, as your viewers and listeners show, there's a lot of people who still think he's great, and there is no doubt that he has got charisma. He's a good campaigner. It's interesting that there is a deafening silence from Downing Street, and whilst Boris Johnson may well be, deployed to go and talk on the rubber chicken circus, as it's called, presumably when he's not on sort of flying solo to go and see Venezuelan presidents and various other people and then just texting the Foreign Secretary en route, there will be a lot of people who like him, but there are an awful lot of people who will not forgive him, and those are people within the Conservative Party.
Not forgive him for what?
Well, Partygate, for one, lying to the Queen, lying to Parliament, lying to the public on so many occasions. And I think the people who don't like him saw through him. And I think, can't remember his name, but the person who said he spat on the fence, I presume he said spat on the fence, not sat on the fence.
No, he said
or worse.
spat. Yeah, he spat on it. It was Chris, actually.
Yeah.
He spat it back.
And I think, anyone who stands for election at whatever level, you are asking the public to trust you. If you abuse that trust, you don't deserve to have it back. I can hear some of you guys at home responding to some of the things that Joe was just saying. I know you guys well. Tell me your thoughts. Richard Tate.
It'll be interesting other people's feedback as we go through the show on this issue. But it feels to me there's two issues. One, I think that in June 22, I checked, his poll rating, there was in the red wall, there was 50% disapproval of his performance. And I think actually since then, people have seen that not only did he betray Brexit, but also he put in place the open borders system, which has basically led to mass immigration, which I think in the red wall we know was a very significant issue behind the Brexit vote, and people feel that they've been utterly betrayed on that. So I think actually his rating's probably got worse since June 2022. The other aspect of this story is, why on earth would Boris do that? Why would he help the person who basically knifed him in the back when, if you're a die-hard Conservative, you're going to say, well, Rishi's going to lose this election, and then if there wants to be some form of rearrangement of the deck chairs, maybe that's Boris's time, not beforehand.
Well,
but you've got that sort of mystery stuff that was knocking around in the Sunday papers with Lady McAlpine, the Henley plot, they now call it, to try and get him back by getting the current sitting MP or current candidate to move out to make way for Boris Johnson. Why would he go back to being an MP? He didn't want to be an MP in the first place. He's too damn lazy.
Well, a spokesperson for him, among other things, says his position has been consistently in support of the Tory party for his entire political life, and that will remain so. And I mean, at the end of the day, what I will find really interesting, Richard, about the next election is how many people actually turn out to vote, because so many people are disillusioned with politics. They don't feel politically connected or engaged. And whatever you think about Boris Johnson, he engaged those people. He reached into them. He convinced them to lend the Tories their vote, often for the first time in their lives. He was a very connecting leader.
And he has been an election winner, but I don't think anybody credibly thinks that the Conservatives, even with him, can win this election. It might be a case of reducing loss. Why would he tarnish his reputation as an election winner? And I think too many people in the Red Wall, I think quite rightly, will feel that actually they lent him his vote and he has completely betrayed it when he was still Prime Minister.
Are you in that Red Wall, and do you feel that, or do you feel completely differently? Tell me your thoughts, Jo.
Well, I just think a couple of things, really. One is that we seem to be completely focusing on the Red Wall because it gave the Tories a majority, with Boris Johnson at the helm, admittedly. So it sort of changed the fortunes of the Conservative Party. So there's a desperate bid by the Conservatives to keep that or win it back, at the expense of the rest of the country. But I think the point you make, Michelle, about people going out to vote is the biggest single problem. And as you well know, because I've told you before, I've got a book just out called Why Vote, which is arguing, actually, that apathy is the most dangerous thing. And
but aren't you a fan of compulsory voting?
I certainly am, yeah.
See, I found the notion that I would be compelled, because I say this often on my programme, if I was not doing this job, I almost certainly, unless something dramatically changed, I almost certainly wouldn't turn out to vote. I think because of the job that I do, I think I should make the effort to engage. So I probably will even end up spoiling my ballot. But the fact that you and people that support that view would try and compel me, I always have the same question for you. How on earth would you get me and people like me to do that?
At the age of 16, you get your national insurance number.
Yeah.
You keep that number for life. At the same time, you should get your right to vote. But you should, just as they do in Australia, you should vote. Because if we don't...
Well, I reject that, by the way, voting from 16, but we'll come on to that. Tell me how you're going to get people like me physically to go and vote.
If you don't vote, you get fined, or, because it would be linked to your national insurance number, not national insurance contributions, which Rishi Sunak wants to get rid of, then actually maybe there would be a deduction in your pension or your benefits.
And do you think that's going to engage me more in politics, that you're going to force me by deducting money from me to engage?
No, of course not. Not by making people do it if they don't want to. What we need to do is to have a process of education. Everybody's got opinions.
But that's really insulting. You're suggesting that people like me that are not politically engaged are doing so because we're not educated.
But actually, Michelle, it doesn't.
I'm not.
No, you just said you need a process of education.
Yes, at school. I mean, so that there are lots and lots...
So you think that people like me that are politically disengaged,
but
and by the way, there are millions of people, when it comes to voting, if I didn't do this job categorically,
Michelle,
I wouldn't vote.
You're not politically disengaged. For 5
when
nights
it comes
a week,
to the purpose of voting, I've just said,
but
in general elections and the like, I'm telling you, me and millions of people
how do we
will not
persuade you?
And you're suggesting that the remedy to get those people engaged is education, which by default, therefore, must mean that you think that we're not engaged because we lack education. I think that's really ridiculous.
Well, I think people don't understand the political system.
So we're not politically engaged because we don't understand.
But you are. But
we understand fully, and we have no trust or connection with the people that are trying to dictate our lives to us. We don't trust them one jot. We don't think that they will actually deliver the things that they say. We think that they're in it for themselves, and that among many are reasons why we're not engage.
No,
It's not because
that's
we lack-
absolutely,
it's
but
not
Michelle,
because
that's
we lack
absolutely the reason
education.
to vote. And in
Absolutely.
Australia, it does actually
Yes.
work very well. Also, under proportional representation,
Yeah.
average turnout is about 10% higher than in the UK,
Yes.
which would mean another 3 million people engaged because you know that every vote is equal and matters.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with Richard
and people
on that.
fought and died and gave their lives and horrific injuries for us to have that freedom, that democratic choice. And I just think it's a matter of respect.
So do I, and I think it's about how you build a civic society and a democracy where we've all got a stake in it. It seems absolutely counterintuitive to say you're not politically engaged when every night of the week you sit...
No, because I qualified what I said. I didn't just put a full stop at the end. I said I'm not politically engaged when it comes to voting in general elections.
You're not engaged with the voting system, but you are engaged in a number of political issues, whether it's about immigration, whether it's about housing,
I would say
about
pretty much
education.
everybody that I know, when I have two sides to my life, I have this media bubble in London, and then I have what I call real life and home. Pretty much every single person, and I'm racking my brains to think if I know any exceptions, pretty much every single person that I know will not vote at the next general election.
Well, I think that's a tragedy for the reason that Richard said. There are people around the world today fighting and dying and risking their lives and being
let me respond to that.
Let
me respond to that point because particularly a lot of women, they did in some cases give their lives as well to enable people like me to have that ability to vote. And what I would say to that is they did those acts which I respect massively and appreciate, so that I had the ability and the right to vote and the choice to vote. They didn't do those things in order for me to be compelled and have money withdrawn from me.
But in Australia, you obviously have the right to spoil your ballot, to abstain, but the point is...
I disagree with what they're doing in Australia as well, by the way, because they have compelled voting there. I disagree with that too.
Yeah, but I just think the evidence is that where you've got PR, where people feel every vote is equal and matters, actually people say, yeah, it's worth it. And look, I knock on more doors probably than any senior politician, and it absolutely saddens me when I get someone opens the door and they says, you're all the same, you never deliver anything, it's not worth voting, and shut the door. And it is actually a real tragedy because that is a question.
What do you think? So when someone says those kind of things to you, what do you take away from that? Do you take away like what Joe says, oh, those people just need to be educated? Is that what you take away?
I think it's a failure of actually. I think it's a failure of our political system. It's a failure of the two-party system, and first past the post, because people realise if you're in a safe seat and you're one of the opposing voters, frankly, your vote counts for almost nothing, and that's an absolute tragedy. I mean, 30 years ago, about 750,000 votes used to swing a government. Now I suspect that number's probably near 1.5 million, 2 million. But nevertheless, that's the flaw in the first past the post system. And we've clearly seen it doesn't lead to strong and stable government.
No, it doesn't. And it goes back to the point about the Red Wall, that if all parties, or both main parties, are focusing on that at the expense of other communities, other voters, then some votes under our current system are worth more than others, which is utterly ridiculous.
I do concede the point that a lot of people will feel that there is literally no point in voting because
but you're never going to change it, and you're never going to get different people in politics.
That's the post system versus the PR system. Yeah. So that's the point I'm conceding there. But you know, you've not convinced me, I'm afraid. And if you're like me at home and you are someone that if you know, because everyone can say whatever they want to say on a poll when someone's like paying attention, but actually when you're at home on your own and you're being honest with yourself, will you engage politically at the next general election? Will you go and put your cross in a box or draw something profanity-wise or whatever on your ballot paper? And if you won't, what will make you change your mind? Are you simply a bit thick and you need a bit more education?
No, that's not what I said.
Do you need a new voting system? What will it be? I say, I put it back on the politicians. I say it's on you. It's on you to be better, do better, and be a better calibre of person, a better calibre of deliverable. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need more accountability and all the rest of it. Maybe that's how you engage people like me. A little bit less stick. A little bit more carrot, perhaps. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts on that. GBViews at gbnews.com is how you get hold of me. There's lots I want to talk to you about in the show. Coming up, I want to talk to you about why are so many people so damn work shy? And what do we do about it? There's a suggestion today that if young people turn down 3 job offers, they might have to be conscripted into the armed forces. Is that a good idea or not? So more broadly, I want to talk about the economically inactive. What on earth is going on? I'll see you in 2.
Mark Dolan Tonight, weekends from 9 p.m. Kinsey, great to have you back on the show. Now, listen, we're not slated to talk about the Prince Harry story, but I've kind of surprised a few people by suggesting that I think he should have armed royal protection when he's in Britain. What do you think?
Well, they aren't my tax dollars that are paying for Prince Harry's protection, but I agree with you. I think that he should feel safe, and he should feel safe to bring his family back to see his father, if that's the case.
Well, his stepmother, Kinsey, Queen Camilla, gets a well-deserved break. Tell me more.
That's right. Queen Camilla has no engagements on her agenda this week, with the Times reporting that she will spend a few days of downtime with the king. Camilla has been working overtime to support the monarchy. Just last month, she repeatedly drove over 6 hours to a royal engagement after her flight was grounded because she reportedly did not want to let down her husband. She will resume engagements on March 11th, representing the king and leading the royal family for the Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey. A source told the Times, although she was not expecting to find herself in the position of leading the family, the Queen is absolutely prepared to do whatever needs to be done for the institution. And can I just say, speaking of Harry, I think the fact that Queen Camilla is seen as leading the family is significant proof that Prince Harry would not return to temporarily support the family, because Camilla's elevated position is likely not something sitting well with him right now. He loved Queen Elizabeth II. He likely resents the idea of Queen Camilla. And we know that that's a position he felt like his mother should be in.
Most definitely. He was very nasty about Queen Camilla in his book Spare.
He was. So I imagine that the idea of her leading the family is something he has a hard time digesting.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tate, and the political commentator, Joe Phillips. Cool, blimey, you lot have got a lot to say about that previous conversation that we've just been having about what I'm making the point that I think it will be really interesting to see just how many people are politically engaged to the point where they will go out and engage and vote one way or another, or spoil their ballot paper or whatever in the next general election. Phil on Twitter or X says, Michelle, you are wrong to advocate not voting in elections. If you don't vote, you give up your right to complain when things go wrong. Just to be clear, Phil, and everybody else, I'm not advocating for people not to vote. Quite frankly, I don't care if people vote or not. It's their business, and it's between them and their ballot box alone. All I'm saying is that there are millions of people out there, and I can massively relate to them, that just are so disconnected with the political system in this country. I'm asking you, what do you do with those people? Do you think they should be fined for having the audacity not to think, actually, do you know what, you lot are so wonderful, I'm going to give you my time, my effort and my energy, and I'm going to engage with your process. Tell me your thoughts. I'll bring you into the conversation in a few minutes. But for now, I want to talk to you about something that really caught my eye today. The amount of economically inactive people in this country is absolutely through the roof. And so many of these people now actually are quite young people, which is really troubling, because if that's how you start your what should be your working life, by actually refusing to engage and go out and work and provide for yourself, surely that's just going to be a slippery slope, isn't it? Well, one suggestion today was put forward, which is if young people refuse a job 3 times, perhaps they should be conscripted essentially into the armed forces. I want to explore that, and then after that I want to explore the broader point of why so many people are economically inactive. But this point about conscription for the younger folk, where are you on that, Richard?
Well, look, I mean, conscription did used to exist. Comes back to your point about compulsion. I think we'd rather not compel people, but actually, if you can make the armed forces a really attractive place to go, and all of the sort of the motivation, the discipline, the structure that comes out of it, then, and I think we have to invest more in our armed forces anyway. We're trying to reduce the compulsion, but look, it is a really serious issue. Too many young people are basically opting out of work. There's a whole issue about the percentage of people that go to university and whether actually it's too easy to opt not to work and to essentially opt for some form of benefit system. And we've got to make it look. We've got to make work pay, and work is a good thing. It's very good for one's health. It's very good for one's family, for one's example to family and friends, and it's good for your community and the economy. And fundamentally, if you can work, you should work.
It's very good for your mental health as well. Everyone seems to be obsessed about that these days, don't they? Where are you on this conscription?
Well, Richard Drax, who is he's a member of the Commons Defence Committee, and he's also a former soldier. I'm quite surprised that he is suggesting that joining the army is some sort of punishment for not taking a job, because it seems to me that that's the last people that the army needs.
I know.
And I think, you know, we're desperately short of funding for defence and definitely short of numbers of people. There has to be something else, and Gordon Brown tried it, I think David Cameron tried it, I think various Prime Ministers have tried it, and there have been various schemes that are sort of, you know, a national volunteering programme, a sort of civic something or other scheme. There's a lot more to this, because the age group of the people that we're talking about, the 16 to 24-year-olds, are the people who lost 2 years of their education during COVID lockdowns and who've lost the ability, it would appear, to sort of get Saturday jobs or evening jobs or weekend jobs. And I think that has a huge difference. And I think, you know, one of the things that has always struck me is anybody looking at us three, apart from the fact that we're on television, but take that away, you would see us most likely sitting in front of a computer. Now, we could be a politician, we could be a TV presenter, we could be a journalist, we could also be an architect, an insurance agent, a doctor. We could be any number of things. But because you don't see the same sort of jobs, unless they're very obvious, like a police officer or fire officer, I think it's really hard for people to know what there is, unless you have that early experience of the sort of part-time jobs.
No, I think it's a bit more than that. I'm afraid, fundamentally, you've got to make work pay. And government policy for too long has kept the threshold of the starting point of income tax way too low. And for too many people, it doesn't pay to go to work. Actually, you make the calculation net at the end of the week. I knew there's a major problem when a taxi driver in a northern town said to me, I'm better off driving 16 hours a week and claiming back pay for the rest of the week than I am driving 40 hours a week. And that is a catastrophic failure of our system about economic motivation. And, you know, bluntly, young people have got to realise there's no such thing as a free lunch. You've actually got to get up, get out and get on. And you can't be paid, if you are healthy, to sit at home because you can't be bothered to go and contribute.
Well, these figures out today from the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, are about people who are workless or economically inactive. It's not the same as benefit claimants, because a lot of the people in these stats...
To be clear, 22% almost of UK working age populations, it's not just all the young people, 22% are apparently economically inactive. I find that quite staggering.
But some of those people will be carers. Some of them will be, you know, caring for home or family members. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are claiming unemployment benefits.
But actually, no, but the real number is 5.3 million are on out-of-work benefits. That's 1 in 8 of the working age population between 16 and 65. And that is a disaster for any country.
But some of those people, Richard, will be getting a carer's allowance because they might be looking after a disabled child or a partner or something.
That carer's allowance, by the way, I think that's shameful on this nation. That I mean, it's not even like if you were working as a carer, it's nowhere even near minimum wage. The amount of money we give to people is an insult, actually.
But it's that number I've just given, about 5.2 million, is about 1.5 million more than in 2019. It's become too easy to claim benefits, and the benefits have gone up the threshold, if you actually got a job for income tax starting, has stayed the same. And therefore, for too many people who are trapped in this calculation, am I better off at the end of the week going to work or staying at home? And that's an absolute failure on the authorities, the establishment and the government.
And the people who are in work but low-paid work are the worst off, actually, because as they get caught in the so-called fiscal drag of ridiculous low tax thresholds, they're then caught in this spiral that actually, do they then go and try and claim working credits to top up their benefits, or do they lose the access to other things? And people who are on 0 hours contracts, you know, like care workers and cleaners and people like that, they don't know from 1 week to the next how many hours they're working. So how can you possibly budget? You know, there is a whole overhaul of work. You know, work has got to pay, as Richard says. But I think, you know, we've also got young people who, as I said earlier, who've missed out on the whole knocking about in the workplace thing. They've lost a lot of confidence.
Yeah, but you see, are you talking about during the COVID time?
The ones who were... So let's suppose you're 18 now. So during COVID, you would have been doing your GCSEs.
Yeah, you see, I think one of the biggest scandals of our time is that everyone was obsessed with locking people down, everyone down, irrespective of their risk levels, and barely a thought was given at all to the, I'll grant you, unintended consequences. I don't think anyone deliberately caused harm. But, you know, where was all the thought? Where was all the consideration? Yeah. And I blame the media as well for a lot of that, because all anyone did was obsess. Why have we not locked down earlier? Why are we not locking down harder and for longer?
But then the most important thing is actually, so how do we deal with it? Now, you know, you could argue that actually you need to support those kids, and the job centres and employment organisations need to do more support. But then you'd have people going, oh, it's ridiculous, you know, we're paying people to help kids into work.
But something's fundamentally wrong. We're told there's loads of vacancies, but there's loads of people not going well, and therefore we've got to have mass immigration to deal with it. Fundamentally, there are too many people going to university on frankly, Mickey Mouse courses, and it's not a coincidence. As more people have gone to university, this problem has grown, because many people, frankly, would be much better in work, training in work, apprenticeships, make that easy, and that would benefit the economy, small businesses, everyone's a winner.
The apprenticeship scheme is an absolute disgrace. I mean, it's virtually fallen by the wayside because lots of companies and public sector organisations were using it as a way to get taxpayer funding to put somebody who was, you know, in their 50s onto an apprenticeship course to do something different. It wasn't actually helping the people who need to be trained. I mean, one of the problems is that we haven't got we haven't got the right skills, particularly among younger people. And we've got this ridiculous snobbery in this country, which goes back generations, that if you are an electrician or a plumber or an engineer or a mechanic or something like that, you are not as valuable as somebody who's been to Oxford.
But that came from the Labour government and Tony Blair's insistence that
it goes back before then.
Up to 50% of people go to university.
Yeah.
When I was at that age, it was about 8 or 9%.
Yes, but...
And things worked a lot better then.
But that snobbery goes back way before Tony Blair.
But those skills come from when you leave school at 16 or 18, you go into the world of work, hopefully with an apprenticeship, and you learn those skills, and that's a great thing.
But where are you going to get an apprenticeship? Well, I mean, where's
the whole scheme is a catastrophe. You've got the apprenticeship levy, which is ridiculous. It's just a tax on big firms, and it's too hard to claim. And the
in
whole
defence of apprenticeships, by the way, I did an apprenticeship when I left school. It was the best thing I ever did.
I think they're great.
There you are.
I think they're great. My grandson's doing one, and it's wonderful.
We support them, but you've got to organise it so that it actually works and firms can use it.
Let me ask you this, though, right? This whole notion of, like, you've got so many people now that are off long-term sick with mental health issues, and a lot of those are young people, and I get quite concerned about that, because once you start getting labelled as a young person about you are so, you know, unwell mentally that you cannot possibly work, how do you even claw yourself out of that hole?
I'm sorry, I'm not really buying it. I really am. I just think there's too many people for whom it's just too easy. It's become look, serious mental health is horrific and a very serious condition. But for too many people, I think it's become a convenient label to say, oh, I need a duvet day, I'm not going to work, I'm not well enough to go to work, I've got to take a few months off, I can claim some benefits. I tell you what, the best, for many people, actually, being busy, going to work is the greatest cure for anxiety and those sort of issues. Get busy, get on, and you'll, funnily enough, all of a sudden, you'll find yourself quite well.
Is that fair?
Well, it's certainly true that if you're busy and active and you feel as though you've got a role and you're useful, you are more likely to find yourself feeling fulfilled. I mean, there are also the downsides of that. People who are bullied at work, people who are stressed out at work, people who are working in appalling conditions and not earning enough money to do what they need to. So, there are two sides to that. I think, the problem of mental health, I think, is something that we shouldn't dismiss lightly, but I do think there has been a tendency to over-medicalise things. And I think, whether you're talking about the menopause, whether you're talking about, feeling a bit down or feeling anxious, what we seem to have lost is the ability to have a conversation that says, let's be kind, let's be empathetic, but we don't need to necessarily stick a label on it.
Well, there you go. Let me know your thoughts on that. You guys are getting in touch. It's surprising me. So many of you are in favour of mandatory voting.
Good.
Goodness gracious me.
That's the only time I've ever been on this show and someone's agreed with me, Michelle.
Ben says the only real democratic system would be if voting was compulsory. How is it democratic to force somebody to go and do something?
Same way as it is to force people to have a driving licence or pay tax.
To get out and vote, says Peter, though, we need candidates who can actually offer something, not people that seem to be completely out of their depth. Audrey says you could stop a lot of this by stopping postal votings. Mark says, can you tell your guests, please, it's politicians and the like that need to change their attitude before they start trying to change mine. Well, there you go. I just told them on your behalf, Mark. Anyway, look, there's lots I want to talk to you about after the break. Specifically, I'm asking, do you think we need more new gas stations now so that we have a little bit more energy security in this country? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst in the south-southeast of the UK, it is actually going to turn largely dry as we go into Wednesday. It's a different story towards the north and west. That's because we have a frontal system here that is eventually going to start to edge back southeastwards as we go through the night. That is going to bring some heavy, persistent rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later into northern England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. Further south and east across the rest of England and Wales, a drier picture, but a cloudy one and a windy story for all, and so temperatures really aren't going to drop much, many places staying in double figures. As we go through tomorrow itself, then, this band of rain does gradually push its way a little bit further south and eastwards, but doesn't make much progress, so it is going to linger and bring quite a bit of rain across northern England and some parts of North Wales too. A drier story further south, limited bright or sunny spells here, but temperatures rising to highs of around 15 Celsius. Windy for most of us, but the strongest winds will be across northwest Scotland where there's the risk of gales, but also some sunshine. As we go into Thursday, and again staying mostly dry towards the southeast, but elsewhere there'll be quite a bit of rain around, outbreaks of rain feeding up from the southwest across many places, with a band of more persistent rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland pushing northwards. Showers to come as we go through Friday. Some of them could be heavy, and then Saturday's likely to turn wet again. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry till 7 o'clock. Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tate, and political commentator Joe Phillips remain alongside me. One of my viewers has just got in touch saying mental health is the new bad back. Cool, blimey, there'll be people that are suffering with mental health that will disagree with that one, but I'm sure as well people will disagree. Stephen says, by the way, you asked about Boris Johnson. Can I just say we need him back like a hole in our heads? Goodness gracious me. I'll come on to these other topics we've been discussing in just a second, but I want to ask you, do you think this country needs new gas power stations? Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security in this country because, you know what, it's all great, isn't it, talking about wind and solar or whatever, but what do you do when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where we need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables. And that is a strategic failure of huge proportions, not only sending money abroad, but what happens if those interconnectors fail? What happens if those countries we're buying electricity from, Norway and France, need it for themselves? We literally would have had blackouts last week. It is disastrous. We should be using our own gas, shale gas, getting cheaper energy, creating jobs and keeping our money here. That's what we should be doing.
So you support Rishi Sunak's proposals then?
No, the truth is actually Rishi Sunak is worried about us and realises that we're on the right track. That's why they're doing this, and that's why they're quite rightly rowing back on the madness of net zero.
Joe Phillips?
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. But for years and years and years, we closed down the storage capacity, which has left us very vulnerable, as was very evident when Putin invaded Ukraine. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. I think, why are they doing it now? Because they're scrabbling around for ideas with, months to go before.
They're doing it now because they fundamentally failed to have enough capacity. They haven't replaced our nuclear power stations. They've let some of the gas stations go beyond the expiry, and they've suddenly realised, oops, we've got a problem. Our whole strategy was grotesquely negligent, and we, the taxpayer, are paying the price.
But, I mean, they could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, why are they blocking or holding back more and more onshore wind facilities? We live on an island. There's an awful lot of wind. I know there are days when the wind doesn't blow, but we do live on an island. We are more likely to get wind. There's an awful lot we can do. We're not investing enough in green technology or nuclear to make ourselves self-sufficient. And meanwhile, energy companies and the big oil companies are making absolute fortunes. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would literally destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primus stove and things.
But over 20 years ago, we were a net exporter of energy, right? When we were using our own oil, our own gas and our own coal. Now, we're a massive net importer. We're sending our money overseas. We're at serious strategic risk. And it's a grotesque failure of, actually by both the two main parties over the last 20 years. And it's now us that are paying the price. We've got the most expensive electricity almost in the Western world. And that is directly linked to our huge, huge generating capacity in renewables.
And storage.
And storage, indeed. But this is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles.
Absolutely.
They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead. Actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country going forward? Lee says, Michelle, please can I make a point when you talk about benefits? He works from home full-time, and he says he still has to get benefit top-ups just to be able to survive. I've got to say, credit to you, Lee. You've told me you've got quite a few kids as well. You know, the pressure is on. I think it's shameful, actually, that someone can work hard, can graft full-time, and still the wages that they're getting are not enough to survive in this country. I think shame on whoever your employer is there. You might want to have a little word. Let me know how you get on there with that. Anyway, look, I want to talk to you about an event that's caught my eye this weekend after the break. It's all about the democracy within media. I'll tell you why I'm interested in this after the break. You won't be surprised to know that one of the leading questions in this debate is how do you solve a problem like GB News?
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
I've got an idea. I think that all 30-year-olds should be given £10,000 from the banks of baby boomers. We've got a situation in this country now where millennials are the first generation in modern times expecting to be poorer than their parents. We, as 30-year-olds like me, are half as likely to own a house as people my age 30 years ago. In fact, the cost of a home in Britain, compared to average incomes, has as big a gap today as it did, wait for it, in the 1860s. It is a Dickensian situation.
Now, I'm sorry about the housing crisis for your generation.
You're not, though, are you?
No,
because you're proprofiting from it.
I'm profiting from it. Don't be ridiculous.
The house prices now, compared to that period.
If this is the case, Benjamin,
have incomes gone up that fast?
To penalise and punish the elderly when they have worked all their lives to put into the system, say it's your fault, whingy, whiny, we're going to be envious.
We're being punished.
No, by the politics, so be the change you want to see in the world.
Taxes, I am actually, and I'm about to tell you about the change I want to see in the world.
Are you good? As long as it's not whining about it.
I'm going to stop whining about it, but we are being taken advantage of at the moment to profit, to help the old. Most of taxpayers' money is spent in two departments, the NHS, so the health department, and the Department for Work and Pensions. Those departments disproportionately serve the older population. Now, I've got no issue with that, but let's not pretend that it is not young working people that is paying for the public services for old people. So actually, we are having it hard, and I just look at the future, and we see a future of perpetually higher taxes to pay for this increasing ageing population, a shrinking labour force, and you're here saying we've got nothing to worry about.
The young stop voting for mass immigration parties. The young stop voting for parties that don't build houses.
Immigrants actually pay taxes, pensioners don't.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel remains till 7 o'clock. Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, and the political commentator, Joe Phillips. We were just talking then about Sunak suggesting then perhaps we need more gas stations to keep us more energy secure in this country. Lots of people are just basically saying that this is just, Alice, for example, says this is all just politicking. Let's put it this way. Mr. Sunak knows what he's doing. And the suggestion there is it's just all about trying to bag votes the next election, is it? You tell me. Anyway, are you at a loose end this weekend or not? Do you sit there and think, what shall I do with myself? We'll get this, everybody. The Media Democracy Festival takes place this weekend. Oh, sounds like a hoot, doesn't it? What do you think is their first item on their agenda? Get this, their #1 discussion topic, their first session of the day. How do you solve a problem like GB News? They're going to focus on an expert panel on hate, conspiracy and bias in TV news and Ofcom's failure to regulate it. Oh, sounds like a riveting day out, doesn't it? It makes me laugh, by the way, because item #2 on their agenda, item #2, is what is media democracy. So they seem to find GB News more important than their own concept more broadly. But actually, Richard, on a serious note, I cannot help but notice the amount of people that seem to me to be so overly concerning themselves with what I would call being very opposite to democracy in media and more about trying to have some form of dictatorship about what people can and cannot actually watch and listen to.
There is no question at all that the establishment is horrified by the growth of GB News and is basically trying to censor it in multiple ways. And that is because they've had their way for about 30 years with the BBC and Sky News and others. And it's all been a sort of cosy-like establishment, and it's drifted further left, and they've been able to just, you know, a cosy little club. All of a sudden, GB News comes along, and it's actually rather popular, and more people are watching it because they love the refreshing debate, they love the spicy disagreements, and that's a really good thing. And actually, people can then say, yeah, well, I listen to both sides, and normally I agree with X, this time I agree with Y, and that's a great thing. That's democracy in action. So why they think that's a problem is completely beyond me.
Joe Phillips.
Well, I think it's fair to say, as most people know, that newspapers are far less regulated than broadcasters. And broadcasters, under the rules and the BBC Charter, which is completely separate, are expected to provide balance. Years ago, when I was a producer, you know, you had, if it was an election campaign, you had to count it to the second as to the amount of airtime you go to anybody representing one particular party. GB News has certainly made its presence felt, and in terms of it punches above its weight, way beyond the number of listeners and viewers. So, you know, although you haven't got millions and millions of people, you're certainly getting headlines, you're certainly making...
But we do reach millions of people. We have huge reach, and actually people, this is one of the things, when you actually look at criticism of GB News, people say, you saw that I'm a Celebrity thing, or their viewers, Kevin and Linda, or whatever it was, Keith and Linda, I can't remember now. That's absolutely absurd. I mean, this programme, for example, the 6 o'clock news hour, is a very competitive thing. This programme regularly now beats, for example, Sky News. Thank you, everybody that chooses to watch and listen. But carry on.
But anyway, you know, my point is that, you know, you're a newcomer on the block, you're building an audience, and you are disproportionately punching above your weight in terms of impact. But as a viewer and as a contributor, I do think that there are times when journalistically it should have a bit more balance. You know, you've got self-confessed, you know, MPs, you've got Lee Anderson, now a Reform MP, you've got Richard as a regularly appearing on here, you've got Ben Habib, you've got a lot of people with political labels who appear on the channel very regularly and very comfortably, which is fine. But if you don't have that journalistic balance, which allows the presenter or presenters to say, well, hang on a minute, let's put another point of view. So I think, you know, there is an element that sometimes it feels as though people are getting a very easy ride and that there isn't a challenge to put the balance, which I think is much more incumbent on the traditional...
But I'll give you, on climate change, there is no debate on the BBC or any other channels whatsoever, so that impartiality just doesn't stack up.
What I find really interesting, by the way, when we speak about balance, what we've got to do is make sure there's due impartiality. So what that means is obviously there's, of course, more than one opinion on very different topics. So we do, of course, have to show you a range of opinions, and I would hope, actually, that's what we do. This festival, by the way, they say that they're an event for open and public debate. They're looking forward to the opportunity to discuss the channel and its impact on the landscape. They want to look at things like the way the Ofcom rulings have been made against GB News and the concerns that raises. And they say they reject the implication that organising a debate is a threat to freedom of speech. Always makes me laugh, though, because no one ever seemed to be concerned about certain perspectives being overly broadcast before GB News came along. It's only now that people perhaps don't agree with some of the opinions that they hear that they seem to busy themselves orchestrating repeat complaints about the channel. Have you noticed that or not? So anyway, look, that's all I've got time for. Thank you to my panel. Thank you at home. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow for Raj Up Next tonight.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst in the south-southeast of the UK, it is actually going to turn largely dry as we go into Wednesday. It's a different story towards the north and west. That's because we have a frontal system here that is eventually going to start to edge back southeastwards as we go through the night. That is going to bring some heavy, persistent rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later into northern England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. Further south and east across the rest of England and Wales, a drier picture, but a cloudy one and a windy story for all, and so temperatures really aren't going to drop much, many places staying in double figures. As we go through tomorrow itself, then, this band of rain does gradually push its way a little bit further south and eastwards, but doesn't make much progress, so it is going to linger and bring quite a bit of rain across northern England and some parts of North Wales too. A drier story further south, limited bright or sunny spells here, but temperatures rising to highs of around 15 Celsius. Windy for most of us, but the strongest winds will be across northwest Scotland where there's the risk of gales, but also some sunshine. As we go into Thursday, and again staying mostly dry towards the southeast, but elsewhere there'll be quite a bit of rain around, outbreaks of rain feeding up from the southwest across many places, with a band of more persistent rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland pushing northwards. Showers to come as we go through Friday. Some of them could be heavy, and then Saturday's likely to turn wet again. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is